Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a former cybersecurity expert seeks solitude in a remote forest with 6 loyal bulldogs, he finds peace until a power-hungry HOA president named Karen declares war over a fence. What follows is a high-stakes clash of privacy, paranoia, and perfectly trained dogs. When I left my job in cybersecurity, I swore I'd never deal with paranoia again. Ironically, that promise lasted exactly 6 months, right until I met Karen. Back then, I thought peace meant distance. 12 acres of pine forest, a small lake, a 2-story cabin with a porch that creaked like an old blues guitar. The nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and even then, you could barely see their roof through the trees. That's exactly why I bought this place. To disappear, to hear wind and crickets instead of office buzz and server alarms. I set up everything myself. Motion sensors along the fence, cameras hidden in birdhouses, infrared night vision tied to a private encrypted cloud. I didn't do it out of fear. I did it because habits die hard. When you've spent 15 years hunting breaches in government networks, you learn that security isn't paranoia, it's hygiene. My 6 bulldogs were my only real company. I adopted them from shelters. All rescues, all scarred in their own way, like me. I trained them to respond to a single whistle and to patrol the property at night. They weren't violent, just loyal. I built them a heated kennel by the Oak Grove and named them after old jazz musicians. Miles, Coltrane, Dizzy, Ella, Duke, and Billy. They didn't bark without reason. If they barked, there was a reason. For a while, life was quiet. My days were spent fixing up the place, painting shutters, clearing brush, rewiring the garage. Evenings meant bourbon on the porch, a cigar, the reflection of the moon over still water. No one bothered me, and I bothered no one. Then one afternoon, a white Lexus stopped at my gate, the kind of car that tells you the driver thinks rules are for other people. A woman stepped out, clutching a clipboard and a phone like she was about to audit the world. Blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, expression permanently stuck between annoyance and superiority. "Good afternoon," she called, pronouncing it like a court order. "Are you the homeowner?" "Last I checked," I said. "Can I help you?" She walked closer to the gate, peering through the iron bars as if I were a zoo exhibit. "I'm Karen Malloy, president of the Oak Hollow Homeowners Association. We've received several complaints about this fence and the animals." She eyed the bulldogs lounging in the yard. "They're quite loud." I smiled faintly. "You've received complaints? From who?" "Residents of Oak Hollow, naturally. Then you might want to check your map, Karen. My property isn't part of Oak Hollow, never was." She frowned. "That can't be right. This entire section falls within our community standard zone." "There's no such thing as a community standard zone in Georgia law," I said evenly. "This land predates your subdivision by about 80 years. My deed is on file at the county office, if you'd like to read it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "We'll see about that. I'll need to conduct an inspection. There have been reports of unregistered animals and unsafe fencing." "Not happening." Her eyes narrowed behind the sunglasses. "Refusing inspection could result in fines." "Then fine yourself," I said. "This is private property, not your little fiefdom. Have a good day." I turned and walked back toward the porch. Behind me, I heard her mutter something about non-compliance. One of the dogs gave a low growl. I whistled once and they settled down. The gate clicked shut behind her as she returned to her Lexus. Over the next week, envelopes began appearing in my mailbox. Notice of violation. Failure to comply. Second and final warning. Each signed by Karen Malloy, HOA president. I laughed the first time, then stopped laughing the third. I sent copies of my deed and survey to the county clerk, confirming, again, that I was not, nor had I ever been, part of Oak Hollow. The county agreed, closed the file, and that should have been the end of it. But Karen wasn't the kind of woman who let go. 2 mornings later, she parked her car near the gate again and stood there taking pictures. When I stepped outside, she shouted, "We'll get this resolved soon, Mr. Barrett. You can't hide behind paperwork forever." I walked down the drive until only the gate separated us. "I'm not hiding behind paperwork," I said calmly. "I'm standing on my land. That's the difference." She hesitated, clearly not expecting me to be polite. "You'll regret this," she snapped, climbing back into her car. The engine roared, gravel spat from her tires, and for a few seconds the smell of burning rubber hung in the air. I watched her taillights vanish down the road. That night, while checking camera feeds, I saved her visits in a separate folder. Something told me this wasn't over, that this woman wasn't just another nosy neighbor, but a storm in designer shoes, waiting for the right time to strike. And though I didn't know it yet, she'd already started writing complaints to the county about me, about my dogs, my fence, and my existence. 2 weeks after the last violation notice hit my mailbox, I received a letter from the county office. It was short, polite, and completely absurd. Apparently, someone had filed a formal complaint about unregistered dangerous animals on my property. The irony made me laugh out loud. I drove down to the county clerk's office that same afternoon, deed folder under my arm, and waited 20 minutes while a young clerk flipped through records. When she finally looked up, she said, "Sir, your property isn't even listed under Oak Hollow's jurisdiction. This complaint shouldn't have reached us." I nodded, smiled, and said, "Try telling that to the HOA queen next door." The case was dismissed within the hour. I thought that would be the end of it. Of course, I was wrong. By the following week, my quiet mornings had turned into a circus of curiosity. Cars from Oak Hollow began to slow down whenever they passed my gate. A few brave souls even stopped to take photos. One afternoon, a man in khakis and a polo shirt strolled up to the gate and shouted, "Hey, you can't block access to this road. It's community property." I walked out, holding my coffee, and said calmly, "It's my driveway, not a community anything. You've got about 10 seconds to leave before my dogs decide your entertainment." He left faster than he arrived. That night, I reviewed my security footage. There she was again, Karen, standing on the roadside, flashlight in hand, photographing the fence like a crime scene investigator. She had a notebook, muttering to herself as if dictating a police report. I zoomed in. She was wearing rubber gloves. Who the hell wears gloves to photograph a fence? I archived the video in a folder labeled Evidence Round 1. The next morning, I decided to send a certified letter to Oak Hollow's board. I attached copies of my deed, property boundaries, and a firm reminder of Georgia's trespass laws. My closing line read, "Any further interference will be treated as harassment under state statute." It was the most polite middle finger I'd ever mailed. The response came 3 days later, hand-delivered by none other than Karen herself. She stood at the gate, waving an envelope like she was serving a royal decree. "Mr. Barrett," she said, "this is a formal acknowledgement from the Oak Hollow Board. We intend to review your property in person next week. Please be cooperative." I chuckled. "Karen, you're welcome to review the weather from the road, but no one stepping foot past this gate." Her face tightened. "Refusing inspection is a serious matter." "So is trespassing," I said. "See you around, President Malloy." That night, I added 2 new sensors along the southern perimeter, small, heat-triggered cameras disguised in tree knots. I configured them to back up footage to an encrypted drive stored in my basement. Paranoia? Maybe, but I preferred to call it foresight. A few evenings later, I caught movement on one of the feeds. Headlights cutting briefly through the trees on the far end of my property line, where no road existed. Someone had driven into the brush, then reversed. The vehicle matched a silver SUV, same one Karen used for her inspections. I didn't confront her. I just noted the time, saved the clip, and installed one more sign. "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." 2 days after that, I found a flyer taped to my mailbox, a community notice from Oak Hollow warning residents about an individual keeping aggressive guard dogs near shared property lines. Below the warning was my address. No name, just an arrow pointing south toward my land. The next morning, I saw 2 teenagers on bikes stop at my gate, reading the sign and daring each other to whistle at the dogs. I stepped onto the porch with a mug in hand and called out, "Try it, and I'll teach them to chase bikes." They scattered like pigeons. By then, it was clear Karen had moved from nuisance to obsession. I began logging her every move, timestamps, vehicle footage, the sound of her voice when she shouted from the road. She wasn't just nosy, she was collecting evidence for a case that didn't exist. I didn't know whether to laugh or brace for impact. That weekend, just after dusk, I was watching a movie when my phone buzzed with a perimeter alert. The northwest sensor had triggered. I opened the feed, a figure standing near the fence, flashlight scanning the woods. The dogs began to bark in unison, deep, thunderous, protective. The figure froze, turned, and bolted back into the dark. When I checked the recording, I saw what I already suspected, Karen's neat blonde bob bouncing as she ran. She'd been back again. I didn't report it yet. I wanted her to dig her own hole a little deeper. Still, that night, as I sat on the porch with a drink in hand, I couldn't shake a feeling crawling under my skin. It wasn't fear, exactly. More like the knowledge that peace never lasts when someone like Karen decides you're her project. She'd already been humiliated once by the county's response, and I knew people like her didn't handle no very well. Whatever came next, she'd make it personal. And judging by the way she looked through that fence last time, I had a feeling she already had. By early spring, Oak Hollow was buzzing with the kind of neighborhood politics I'd moved to the countryside to escape. Apparently, I was now the villain in their suburban saga, the dangerous loner in the woods. Someone from the development even started a Facebook group called Keep Oak Hollow Safe. My name wasn't mentioned, but the location photos made it obvious. Every time I saw my fence on their feed, I imagined Karen behind the keyboard, wine glass in hand, typing with righteous fury. That month, she sent me a printed invitation to their community assembly. The letterhead read like a sermon, to discuss property standards and safety concerns for the greater area. I tossed it straight into the fireplace. The next day, I found another envelope, hand-delivered, taped to my gate. It wasn't an invitation this time, it was a demand. Attendance expected, it said. Failure to appear will be considered non-cooperative behavior and may result in further action. I almost laughed out loud. Further action sounded like something a kindergarten principal would say to a kid who refused to nap. A week later, I heard from my friend, Deputy Cole, one of the few local officers who still had common sense. He stopped by on patrol, rolled down his window, and said, "Dean, you might want to know there's been some chatter at the station. The HOA has been filing noise and safety reports again. Nothing stuck, but they're persistent." I nodded. I figured as much. Then he smirked. "You know the lady in charge? Karen something. She's been calling twice a week. My captain told her to stop or file an actual claim." By then, my patience was thinning. I drafted a legal notice through my attorney, a formal cease and desist addressed to Oak Hollow HOA and Karen Malloy personally. It outlined every prior contact, reminded her that her jurisdiction ended at her fence, and warned of legal repercussions for further harassment. I mailed it by certified post, knowing she'd have to sign for it herself. 2 days later, she showed up at my gate again. She didn't bring her usual smug confidence this time. She brought a printed letter in a clear sleeve, her lips trembling with forced calm. "You think you can intimidate me with paperwork?" she said. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Barrett. I'm only trying to protect this community." "Protect it from what?" I asked. "Property that doesn't belong to you?" Her nostrils flared. "I've seen the way your dogs act. They bark at everyone who passes. That's aggressive behavior." "They bark at trespassers," I said evenly. "That's called training, not aggression." She leaned closer to the gate. "You'll regret defying this association." I tilted my head, smiling slightly. "Karen, I've defied the federal government before breakfast. You don't scare me." Her face twisted, but she didn't respond. She turned sharply, marched back to her car, and sped off down the gravel road. I watched until the dust settled, the only sound the low hum of cicadas and the soft panting of Duke beside me. A few mornings later, I found something new. A metal sign staked into the ground near my driveway. It read, "Unsafe property. Beware of dangerous animals." At the bottom, in smaller print, placed by the Oak Hollow Homeowners Association for Public Safety. I stared at it for a good minute, then let out a laugh so hard I startled the dogs. By that afternoon, I had pulled the sign up, photographed it, and checked my cameras. Sure enough, there she was again. 2 nights before, at 1 in the morning, Karen had parked her SUV by the tree line, walked across my boundary line with a hammer, and planted the sign herself. I saved the footage, every frame, from 3 different angles. I considered calling Deputy Cole, but decided against it. Not yet. Let her keep stacking the evidence herself. After that, I reinforced the system even more. An extra layer of motion sensors near the back path that led through the woods to the lake. I'd noticed faint tire tracks there once, as if someone had driven close to the line and backed out again. Paranoia maybe, but it didn't hurt to be cautious. That weekend, the air was clear, sky sharp blue, and I decided to drive into town for supplies. Dog food, lumber, bourbon, the essentials. When I left, the cameras were armed, the gates locked, and the Bulldogs free to roam the fenced acreage. I was gone for less than a day. When I returned that night, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Usually the dogs barked once when I came up the drive. This time they stood still at the edge of the yard, alert but calm, as if waiting for me to notice something. I didn't see the tire tracks until morning. Faint, fresh, Cutting across the southern path, the back gate was shut, but the dirt told a story. Someone had come close. Someone had turned around. I didn't need to guess who. I checked the footage and saw only flickers of movement. Headlights deep in the woods, then gone. My sensors hadn't triggered. Either she'd found a blind spot or was testing me. I made a note to fix that blind spot. That night, I added one more log entry. Suspected intrusion attempt. Subject, KM vehicle, silver SUV. No entry recorded. Then I locked my house, whistled for the dogs, and stood by the window with a single thought looping through my head. If Karen wanted to cross that fence so badly, she'd find out soon enough what waited on the other side. It happened on a humid Friday night in late June, the kind of southern evening where the air hangs thick and still, and even the frogs sound too tired to croak. I had driven out to Savannah that morning to pick up some new equipment, a pair of upgraded thermal cameras, and a backup power relay for my security system. It was supposed to be a quick trip, 4 hours there and back, maybe a stop for ribs along the way. By dusk, I was checked into a roadside motel halfway home, too tired to drive the last leg. The dogs were fine, I thought. The kennel gate was open to the inner yard, the cameras were live, and every square inch of the property was wired into my encrypted system. What could possibly happen? At exactly 10:47 that night, my phone buzzed. Motion alert, south perimeter, near the old trail behind the lake. At first, I thought it was a deer or a coyote. Then another alert came from a heat sensor farther inland. A moving, human-shaped signature, medium height, slow steps. The feed came online, grainy night vision showing a figure creeping through the woods with a flashlight. My heart sank. And then, against my better judgment, I laughed. Even from the pixelated outline, I knew that posture, the stiff shoulders, the arm raised like she was about to scold a child. Karen. She was actually doing it. On the feed, her voice came faintly through the mic. Let's see how this outlaw lives. Maybe then the county will listen. She was talking to herself, narrating like she was filming a reality show. She moved through the brush, pointing her flashlight at tree trunks and muttering about violations. The infrared caught everything. Her tablet glowing pale blue, the sweat on her forehead, the precise moment she stepped past my property line. The motion sensors tripped in sequence, 1, 2, 3, and a low-frequency alarm clicked in the kennel yard. 6 bulldogs lifted their heads in perfect unison, ears twitching. On the camera, I saw them spread out silently, like soldiers moving into formation. When Karen reached the clearing near the back fence, the dogs appeared. 6 compact, muscular shapes emerging from the shadows, collars glinting in the infrared. For a moment, she froze, blinded by her own flashlight reflecting off their eyes. Then the barking started, low, thunderous, bone-shaking. She screamed, stumbled backward, and dropped her tablet. I watched it all from my motel room, transfixed, half horrified, half grimly satisfied. The dogs didn't touch her. They surrounded her, barking, herding her away from the porch lights toward the exit trail. Karen's flashlight beam shook wildly, jerking from one barking shape to another as she shouted, "Help! Somebody help me!" Her voice cracked into a sob. She tripped over a root, fell into the mud, scrambled up again, her blouse torn at the shoulder. For 10 full minutes, she spun in circles trying to find her way out while the dogs barked and paced around her, tails stiff but controlled. When she finally found the tree line again, she sprinted, really sprinted, through the woods, branches whipping her face, one shoe lost somewhere behind her. The moment she crossed the outer fence, the dogs stopped barking all at once. Just stood there, watching her vanish into the night. The cameras captured everything. Her entry, her panic, her escape. 3 different angles, audio included. The system time-stamped each event, automatically syncing to my server. When the footage finished uploading, I poured myself a drink, sat back in the motel chair, and replayed it twice. Once for evidence. Once because part of me couldn't believe what I'd just witnessed. The next morning, when I pulled into my driveway, the dogs trotted up like nothing had happened. Miles had Karen's missing shoe in his mouth. I laughed, took it, and tossed it in a storage box labeled evidence. The yard looked undisturbed except for a few footprints and the faint outline of tire tracks leading out of the backwoods. I checked the gate cameras. Sure enough, around midnight, her SUV had reversed out from the old maintenance road, headlights flicking once before she sped off toward the main highway. By noon, word was already spreading. One of the HOA members called the county police to report that their president had been attacked by wild dogs while inspecting community property. A patrol car showed up at my gate 2 hours later. Deputy Cole was behind the wheel trying not to laugh. "Dean," he said, leaning out the window, "you wouldn't happen to have video of this attack, would you?" "Oh, I've got video," I said, handing him a thumb drive. "High definition, infrared, time-stamped, and with sound." He grinned. "You really don't miss a trick, do you?" "Old habits," I said. You might also find a nice audio moment where she announces she's inspecting how the outlaw lives. Should help clear things up. Cole shook his head. Christ. You'd think people like her would have learned to stay out of trouble. Later that day, I heard from a friend at the county hospital that Karen had checked herself in for emotional distress and minor abrasions. Word was, she'd told the staff she'd been ambushed by feral animals while on official business. I didn't respond publicly, didn't call her, didn't post a thing. Instead, I downloaded the backup footage to 3 separate drives and locked them in my safe. That evening, as the sun bled orange over the lake, I sat on my porch with a beer in hand and the dogs at my feet. The yard was peaceful again, cicadas humming, air thick with the scent of pine and mud. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just a strange, quiet certainty. Karen had crossed the line she'd spent months pretending didn't exist. And though she didn't know it yet, she'd left behind every piece of evidence I'd ever need. 2 days after the incident, I was sitting in my workshop repairing a generator when a white envelope slid under my gate. No postage, no return address, just my name printed in all caps like someone shouting in typeface. Inside was a legal summons, Karen Malloy versus Dean Barrett, alleging reckless endangerment, emotional trauma, and maintaining dangerous animals. I almost choked on my coffee reading it. The nerve of this woman. She trespasses on private land, gets herself cornered by dogs, and now I'm the villain. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Rachel Morris. We'd worked together years ago on a data breach case, and if there's one thing Rachel loved more than justice, it was humiliating idiots in court. I emailed her the summons, and within minutes she called back. "Dean, please tell me you have footage." "I've got it in 4K infrared with synchronized audio," I said. Her laugh was pure delight. "Then sit back and relax. This is going to be fun." Meanwhile, Karen had gone on the offensive. The Oak Hollow Facebook group was buzzing again, full of phrases like unprovoked attack and unlicensed animals. They even posted blurry photos of my fence, captioned "The Lair of a Madman." Someone slipped copies of those posts into mailboxes across the county. By evening, half the town had an opinion about the hermit with the Bulldogs. I spent the next day organizing my evidence. I had more than enough. The original recordings, GPS logs from my sensors, timestamps showing the moment she crossed the property line, even the metadata proving she brought a recording device with her. But the crown jewel was the audio. Karen's own voice saying, "Let's see how this outlaw lives." You couldn't script better proof of intent if you tried. Rachel advised me not to release anything to the public. "Let her keep digging," she said. "If she thinks she has the upper hand, she'll double down. And that's when we hit back." Sure enough, the next morning, I woke up to find a county animal control truck idling near my gate. 2 officers stood outside, clipboards in hand. One of them, a young guy who looked barely old enough to shave, shouted, "Sir, we've had a report of unlicensed guard dogs and unsafe enclosures." I nodded, unlocking the gate just enough for conversation. "You have a warrant?" "No, sir, just a report. We'd like to verify the conditions." I smiled thinly. "Then come back with a warrant. And bring your legal department while you're at it." They looked uncomfortable, muttered something about following procedure, and drove off. Within an hour, Rachel had filed a complaint with the county against Oak Hollow HOA for false reporting and harassment. That evening, as the sun went down, I sat in front of my monitors reviewing Karen's Facebook activity. She'd posted a dramatic photo of her arm in a sling with the caption, "Recovery is slow, but justice will come." The comments were a mix of sympathy and skepticism. One person wrote, "Didn't you break into that guy's property?" Another said, "Maybe don't provoke someone with dogs next time." Karen replied to none of them. 2 days later, Rachel called. They served us the official court date, next Monday. Perfect timing. "Perfect?" I asked. "Oh, absolutely," she said. "You see, I already subpoenaed the county GIS maps, police reports, and your property deed. The HOA has no jurisdiction, no inspection rights, and no standing. And when the judge sees the video, this whole charade will collapse faster than her fake injury claim. That weekend, while Karen paraded around the neighborhood with a neck brace she clearly didn't need, I quietly prepared. I printed stills from the footage, her crossing the property line, her face caught mid-scream, her tablet on record. I compiled timestamps and sensor data into a neat report. Every file, every second of her trespass was cataloged and verified. But it wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. This woman had publicly smeared me, weaponized bureaucracy, and treated my private land like an extension of her ego. If Rachel was right, and she usually was, we'd not only win, but bury her legally. The night before the hearing, I sat on my porch with a cigar, and my dog sprawled at my feet. The air was calm, the frogs loud, the lake glass smooth under the moonlight. I thought about how surreal it all felt. How a woman I barely knew had turned my life into a courtroom drama because she couldn't accept a locked gate. When the security alert chimed softly from my laptop, I almost ignored it. But curiosity won. It was another car, idling just past the property line. Headlights off, silver SUV. Karen was sitting inside, window cracked, staring at my gate through binoculars. I hit record. The courthouse smelled like coffee, old carpet, and other people's mistakes. Monday morning sunlight slanted through tall windows as I followed Rachel into the courtroom, briefcase in hand. Karen sat on the opposite bench in a white suit and pearls, her arm wrapped in a suspiciously pristine sling. She didn't look injured, she looked rehearsed. Her lawyer, a nervous man in an oversized jacket, kept whispering in her ear like a stage director feeding lines to a bad actress. The judge, an older man with half-moon glasses and zero patience for drama, entered and called the case. Malloy versus Barrett, he said. Claims of endangerment, trespass, and emotional distress. He barely finished the sentence before Rachel stood up. Your Honor, we have video evidence that will clarify this entire situation. Karen's lawyer objected immediately, something about privacy invasion. The judge waved him off. Let's see the video. Rachel plugged in a flash drive and the screens came alive. The footage was crisp and cold, a black and white image of Karen slipping through my back fence with her flashlight, muttering about inspections. Her voice came through the speakers clearly. Let's see how this outlaw lives. Maybe then the county will listen. You could have heard a pin drop. Then came the dogs, 6 shadows emerging from the darkness, barking, circling. The audio filled the courtroom. Karen screaming, tripping, scrambling through the mud. No blood, no bites, just a woman trespassing, panicking, and running. When the video ended, there was silence except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. The judge leaned back slowly. Mrs. Malloy, do you deny that this is you in the footage? Karen's lips moved soundlessly for a second. That's taken out of context, she stammered. I was performing a safety check. Rachel's smile could have cut glass. On property that doesn't belong to you, after dark, without consent, carrying recording devices, that's not a safety check. That's a crime. Karen's lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge raised a hand. Counselor, I've seen enough. He turned to Karen. Mrs. Malloy, this court dismisses your claim with prejudice, and I'm forwarding the footage to the sheriff's office for review under criminal trespass statutes. You may want to contact your attorney again, one who practices criminal law. Karen's face drained of color. Her lawyer slumped like a deflated balloon. Rachel, meanwhile, was glowing like a proud pyromaniac, watching her work burn perfectly. Outside the courthouse, reporters were already waiting. Word travels fast when the HOA queen falls from grace. Someone must have leaked the case schedule. Maybe one of her own board members. A local journalist with a recorder asked, Mr. Barrett, any comment on the incident? I just said, I believe in property rights and bulldogs. Then walked off. The next few days were chaos. The story exploded across town. HOA president caught trespassing on private property. Local news replayed clips from the court feed. The part where she fell into the mud ran on loop. Memes appeared online within hours. Someone even edited dramatic music over the footage and titled it Karen versus the Bulldogs, Dawn of Bark. Rachel called me the next day, half laughing, half exasperated. You've gone viral, Dean. Congratulations. Also, brace yourself. The county sheriff just opened a formal investigation. They're pulling her digital devices. A week later, the sheriff's office held a press conference. They'd found files on Karen's tablet, unauthorized photos of multiple residents' backyards, Audio logs from meetings she'd secretly recorded, even footage from small cameras she'd hidden on HOA property. One resident stepped forward claiming she'd installed a security monitor in his yard without consent. Another said she'd pressured him to sign HOA membership forms for land that wasn't under their control. The press loved it. The HOA board didn't. Within days, half its members resigned, and the remaining ones called for an emergency leadership review. Karen was suspended indefinitely, pending investigation. One night, as I sat on my porch, watching the fireflies flicker like static in the humid air, my phone buzzed with a message from Rachel. Her laptop's evidence is damning. This is moving toward criminal charges, invasion of privacy, falsifying complaints, the works. I typed back, good. Maybe now she'll learn what no trespassing really means. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter. The dogs slept peacefully, no longer pacing at night. The forest had gone quiet again. No headlights, no voices, just the sound of wind and frogs. But the part of me that used to chase digital ghosts for a living couldn't help but wonder what else was on those files. How long had she been spying, and on how many people? The answer came 2 days later when the sheriff called personally. Barrett, he said, you might want to sit down for this. Turns out your HOA president wasn't just snooping. She was collecting private data, trying to map every non-member property around Oak Hollow. Looks like she was building a case to force annexation into the HOA. I let out a slow whistle. All that because I told her no. Yeah, he said. Some folks don't handle boundaries well. The trial that followed wasn't about a fence anymore. It was about control, privacy, and the lengths one woman would go to feel powerful. The county courthouse was packed that morning. Reporters, homeowners, even a few ex-members of Oak Hollow filled the benches like they were watching a season finale. Karen arrived surrounded by 2 lawyers this time, wearing another immaculate white suit, as if color alone could bleach away her reputation. She tried to smile for the cameras, but the moment the sheriff walked in with a box labeled digital evidence, Malloy, her face twitched. The prosecution laid everything out like a surgeon with sharp tools. First came the trespass video, again. Then the files from her tablet, photographs of residents' yards, spreadsheets of property lines, notes on which homes she believed suitable for annexation. And then came the real shocker. Audio clips of private HOA meetings where she ordered her board to find leverage against non-members. One line silenced the courtroom. If we can't make them join, we'll make them miserable until they do. Her lawyer tried to object, claiming the data was taken out of context. The judge sighed. Hey, counselor, the context is right here on the screen. Then Rachel took the floor for our side. She wasn't fiery. She was surgical, calm, precise, lethal. She showed how Karen had falsified reports, altered GPS coordinates, and even forged timestamps to make it appear that my property violated safety codes. This wasn't negligence, Your Honor, she said. It was a calculated campaign to coerce a citizen into surrendering private rights. The prosecutor added that Karen had violated multiple privacy statutes, including installing cameras on land that didn't belong to her. 3 homeowners testified that she had pressured them into allowing HOA safety devices in their gardens, only to discover later that the feeds went directly to her personal laptop. One elderly resident broke down on the stand, saying she'd been too scared to speak up until now. Karen's defense crumbled piece by piece. At one point, she tried to stand and address the judge directly. I was protecting the community, she shouted, voice trembling. He was dangerous. He was defiant. The judge's reply was ice cold. Mrs. Malloy, the only danger here is your disregard for the law. Over the next week, the trial unfolded like slow justice. The forensic technicians confirmed everything. Her hard drive contained falsified inspection reports, doctored emails, even drafts of anonymous complaints she'd filed under fake names. The HOA board officially dissolved itself mid-trial, publicly apologizing for enabling Mrs. Malloy's overreach. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom was silent. The judge adjusted his glasses and said, "The evidence demonstrates a pattern of harassment, deceit, and criminal trespass. The defendant sought to misuse her position to exert unlawful control over private citizens." He paused, looking directly at her. This court sentences Karen Malloy to 9 years in state custody without eligibility for parole and fines totaling $250,000. A gasp rippled through the room. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. Just a quiet, broken sound, half sob, half denial. Her lawyers stood frozen as the bailiffs approached. She turned once, meeting my eyes. For a second, she didn't look angry anymore, just small, hollow, lost in a reality she'd built herself. Then she was led away, heels clicking like the last ticks of a dying clock. Outside, the air felt cleaner somehow. Cameras flashed, microphones hovered, but I said nothing. The sheriff gave a brief statement confirming further charges: falsifying official complaints, invasion of privacy, obstruction. Oak Hollow HOA would be placed under temporary county oversight pending an external audit. That night, Rachel called me from her office, laughing softly. "You realize you're about to become a legend, right? The man who took down an HOA tyrant with 6 bulldogs and a camera system." "I didn't plan on being famous," I said. "I just wanted peace and quiet." "Well," she replied, "you earned it. And by the way, the civil court approved your damages claim, $680,000. Justice has a price tag after all." When I hung up, I sat on the porch again, listening to the night settle over the lake. The dogs lay scattered around the steps, snoring softly. Somewhere out there, the world had finally stopped revolving around Karen Malloy. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about all the other Karens out there, the ones who thought they owned more than they did, who mistook control for purpose. Tonight wasn't about revenge. It was about a line in the dirt, drawn clear and finally respected. The news spread faster than wildfire. HOA president sentenced for trespassing and harassment. For the first time in months, Oak Hollow was quiet. I spent the following weeks cleaning up the wreckage, removing old warning signs, fixing fences, rebuilding what her obsession had broken. The county wired the settlement into my account, $680,000, but the real reward was silence. One morning, I printed a sign for my gate in bold black letters: "Private property, armed, video monitored, Bulldogs on patrol." Underneath it, I pinned a laminated photo of Karen taken from the courthouse broadcast with the words, "This is not a game. This is defense." The neighbors didn't come by anymore. The new HOA board sent a letter apologizing for the previous administration's misconduct. I didn't bother replying. Peace doesn't need correspondence. My life returned to what it was supposed to be. Mornings by the lake, dogs chasing dragonflies, evenings with bourbon and the hum of crickets. Sometimes I still catch myself glancing at the camera feeds out of habit, expecting headlights in the woods or the shape of a woman with a clipboard. But the screens stay dark now, except for fireflies drifting past the lens. When the sun sets over the water, the dogs sprawl across the porch steps, snoring softly. I look at the gate sign glowing in the dusk and think about all the boundaries people ignore until they burn their hands on them. Some lessons, it seems, can't be taught, only lived.